The real victims are the civilians, are the people of Gaza, who are, in a sense, hostages of Hamas. You cannot kill ideas. What the Israelis are trying to do in Gaza is completely absurd. They will strengthen the idea rather than they will give it more strength. They cannot kill Hamas. They will strengthen it. If you consider this from the perspective of the region, the United States is definitely not a reliable partner. To its allies, it's very reliable. To its enemies,
right.
you can rely on it blundering.
My guest today is Nadim Shehadi, who is a renowned Lebanese economist and thought leader who has enjoyed an extensive career in academia and policy advice. Until recently, he was the executive director of the Lebanese American University's New York headquarters and academic center. He has also held positions as director of the Fairs Center for Eastern Mediterranean Studies at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, as associate fellow of the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House in London, a senior member of St. Anthony's College, Oxford, where he also served as director of the Center for Lebanese Studies from 1986 to 2005. Nadim is also a consultant to several governments and international organizations. He has produced several publications and contributes regularly to media coverage of Middle Eastern affairs, including through a semi-regular opinion column in Arab News. Nadim joins me today for his reflection on the events unfolding in Israel, Gaza and the West Bank, and how these impact Lebanon and the broader region. Nadim, thank you very much for joining me on The Voices of War.
Thank you, Matt.
And now it's an absolute pleasure, and as we were talking offline, I think there are many intersecting interests that we share. Whether it's
forgot to say that I'm now in Beirut. I'm speaking to you from the mountains outside Beirut. So I look out of the window and the balcony to check if there are any planes coming.
Oh my God, that's rather dark humor, but I can understand that. And might I say, the wonderful city of Beirut. I've had the pleasure of spending a couple of wonderful days walking the streets, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I do hope to make the link as we talk, as you alluded to in our preamble.
I've been to Sarajevo too, and I've had. It was a very interesting visit. I met a lot of people from civil society there, and we discussed the differences between the peace agreements that settled our conflicts, the Taif agreement in Lebanon and the Dayton agreement.
Yeah, and I definitely want to come to that. But before we, I guess, dive into the discussion proper, it would be, I think, really useful for our audience to get an understanding of your own background. So firstly, given how much you've done across your career, how do you describe what you do? But also, how did you even get into the space where you are now? What motivated your entry into international relations, economics, etc.?
Well, I studied economics, and I was unhappy with the way economics was being taught with mainstream economics. At the time I was studying, so I got distracted and got interested in the history of economic thought rather than in economics proper. So I'm more of a historian of ideas and how ideas become accepted and how they become unquestioned. Where there are when sets of ideas become unquestionable. I think that's the biggest danger.
As in, they become we become wedded to them. Like, for example, trickle down economics.
Whatever. Where you don't even have to. You don't question anymore the basics, the fundamental assumption, and your. So that's what. So I shifted from. I was doing a PhD in the history of ideas, of how they the post World War II economics, which were very statist, where what were the debates that made us reach there, if you like. And by pure accident, I started a job in Oxford, and I stayed there for 20 years instead of just 2 months, and shifted completely to Middle Eastern studies, and later at Chatham House again for about 20 years. It was so I'm an imposter, if you like. I'm an imposter on like I shouldn't call myself an economist, and I'm an imposter on several fields.
Well, okay, that's not how I would have described it, given your reputation. But I do appreciate the humility. And one thing that I guess struck me is the when you were talking about, I guess, the theories of or economic theory, economic thinking, and how we can get stuck in our ways. It feels like that resonates quite strongly right now, given what's happening in the Middle East. That
absolutely
many players might be stuck in their paradigm, in their theory, perhaps geopolitical theory or however we want to describe it. So perhaps that's an interesting launching platform for us. How would you summarize, in your view, what is happening in the Middle East right now?
To simplify matters, I think what happened in Gaza recently, last month, exactly a month and 1 day ago, is a standard guerrilla operation, which was succeeded beyond expectation. And the standard guerrilla operation, if you look at textbook guerrilla theory, Mao Zedong and Che Guevara and Ho Chi Minh and whatever, it's basically 3 steps. You infiltrate the population, you hit at the enemy hits back and causes collateral damage with the population, and the population gets angry and outraged, and they support the guerrilla more. So that's basically and that's what we're saying. We're saying that and we've seen that pattern happen over the last at least 10-15 years regularly, where Hamas provokes something by Israel, then retaliates, and Israel then reacts and hits at Gaza, and the whole region rises in outrage. And in this case, the whole world is rising in outrage because of the way Israel is bombing Gaza. So
okay,
it is called this strategy of provocation.
Well, it's certainly achieved that. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
So
but
it has, and so going back from that, what's really silly in a way is that we've seen it happen. I mean, there was one episode in last April. There was one in 2021, which was a major one. There was 2014. There was 2009, 2012 also. At different stages, different intensity, always the same pattern.
Do you consider this? I mean, given the outrage you pointed out, global outrage towards what Israel is doing now in Gaza. Although I do want to ask you whether you think that is actually global, or are they pockets of support for Israel that we're still, I guess, seeing?
Of course, no. Of course, there is. The world is complete. Actually, it's very interesting because this crisis has brought out the best and the worst in people, and it's brought out the real people, the real person. I'm looking at the declarations of some of the politicians in the US. It's fascinating how some of them, the ones who pretended to be very progressive and all that, how they take a position which is obviously very political.
Mm.
So no, there is. It's divided almost every country is divided.
So how do you, from where you're sitting, and as you made the point in Beirut, and I just want to, I guess, place our viewers and listeners in a moment in time that, today is the 8th of November, as you alluded to, and it's just gone after midday in Beirut and Jerusalem. So, this might come out, barely a few hours later, but just so people know when we're talking. How do you interpret, from where you're sitting, the actions by Israel in Gaza as well as in West Bank?
Yes, I think, well, Israel has, in a way, no choice but to fall into the trap every time.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that they haven't found an alternative
Yeah.
falling into the trap. So that's from on the Gaza side. The real victims are the civilians, are the people of Gaza, who are, in a sense, hostages of Hamas. They've never been consulted by Hamas about dragging them into a war that's going to destroy them and kill so many people and probably displace many more. And they have no choice. In a way, they are. Hamas controls the area. And Hamas also controls the negotiations with Israel. So Hamas, from time to time, eases matters. Like very recently, in fact, and that's the reason why the Israelis were taken by so much surprise. Very, very recently, there has been an agreement between Israel and Hamas, brokered by the UN and the Qataris and the Egyptians, to allow I think about 18,000 workers to go across to Israel, and services and money, and they've released some money.
And in construction industry, I think in particular,
construction industry, and for someone in Gaza to go and work in Israel, it's very lucrative.
Of course.
So you're asking me where I am. I'm also a hostage. Because Lebanon itself is a hostage to another militia, which is Hezbollah, because Hezbollah can ignite a war any minute without us in Lebanon having an opinion on it, about it. So that's why I feel this similarity with the people of Gaza.
And I think
there is no dissent in Gaza because they control it with there's dissent is not allowed.
It's ruled by the iron fist, ruthless.
It's ruled by the iron fist and by gravity. They throw people off balconies sometimes. Like that's the way they took over Gaza, through violence. And in a way, that's the way also that Hezbollah took over Lebanon.
Right. Okay. And I definitely want to get into those parallels because they're important.
So the other side of the equation is that these movements are in a way empowered by Israeli reaction.
Okay.
So they what happens is, and their main victory is against their local rivals. So Hamas's victory is complete and absolute against the PLO and against the Palestinian National Authority, not against Israel.
It galvanizes its grip on Gaza.
Its grip, and also it takes credit that it's defending the cause. And Hamas's agenda is that only armed resistance can liberate you, whereas the PLO and the Palestinian Authority are doing negotiations. And here of course, Israel takes a lot of the credit for empowering Hamas, if you like, or the blame for empowering Hamas, because in several instances, when, say, in 2006, and 2009 and other places, when there were hostages taken by Hamas or by Hezbollah, Israel would do a swap, and they would swap one hostage for hundreds of hostages or hundreds of prisoners in Israeli jails, whereas the negotiations, which have been going on now for 33 years, haven't released a single prisoner from Israeli jail.
Right.
So you can see that. So of course, Hamas can claim that their
methods,
armed struggle methods produce, and that the enemy only understands armed struggle, and that playing Gandhi doesn't work with the Israelis.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked in the language that you use is that Hamas has set a trap. And this is something I published a short little piece a few days ago, kind of talking to the same angle about this kind of trap that Israel was left between a rock and a hard place. They're doomed if they do, doomed if they don't, because they had to, I guess, react to what is gross inhumanity that we saw on October 7th, and because of those hostages, their ability to act was also severely constrained and limited. So therefore, they resorted to bombardments, excessive bombardments, in my view, for vengeance. And this is obviously Netanyahu's words, right? It was vengeance. It's to exact, the bloodlust that is understandable given the circumstances. But one of the things that I'm still wrestling with to understand, and this applies both to Hezbollah as well as Hamas, is whilst, as you said, they don't necessarily enjoy a lot of support, perhaps by the locals, but in the Hamas case, they were as democratically elected as they could be, and apparently, from all accounts, it was a very democratic. Okay, right? Yes. Sorry, this is that's the question. Yeah. Please go on.
No, the 2006 elections, where so I was there. I was in Cairo at the time, and I opened the newspaper. There were 11 lists for the PLO, Fatah, and the Independents, which is the secular part,
right.
And there was only one single Hamas list with its ally.
Right.
So that's the reason for. So the anti-Hamas list, the anti-Hamas vote
was divided, basically.
Divided.
Yeah. It was diluted, basically, because there were so many options.
Very much diluted. And also, it's unfair to say that it was democratically elected after 17 years, because most of the people in Gaza were not born yet or could not vote. So it's your blame in a way, because the election of Hamas is mentioned as a blame rather than you elected them.
It's your fault. Absolutely. And
but it's not, because they and the world has changed a lot since. You have a completely new generation, and generations change.
And their views change, and
against their parents, in a sense, and there is a generational change since that time in the whole region, but in a way represented by the Arab Spring. So the Arab Spring is a generational change against the ideas of the previous generations, which were very nationalistic, where you accepted the rule of dictatorship because of the priorities of the battle and the cause and nationalism. So the Arab Spring represents that.
And in Gaza too? I mean, is
No, in Gaza there is. In Gaza we don't know
yeah.
because there's no expression. But there are. I mean, there are. There was a time around 2011 also when you could see a lot of hip hop and YouTube music videos and you can now get them on get these things on online discussions like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces.
Right.
I mean, I once stumbled. I listened to Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse when I'm going for a walk or when I'm on the treadmill, or and I stumbled on a group from Gaza, on the discussion from Gaza, less than a month ago. Sorry, less than a month before the war started, and it was very interesting. It was some people were in Gaza itself, and others were in Germany, in Canada. And Belgium.
So the Palestinian diaspora.
And the people who were in Gaza were telling them how good the life was, and that they cross over to Israel, they make $4,000 a month, they live like a king in Gaza with that money, and I do barbecue on the beach with and eat fish on the beach. What do you do in Belgium? How many people do you see? Do you have any friends? You work your ass off.
Yeah.
And
That's so interesting.
You can hardly pay the bills. And one of them told him, "Yes, when I came here, I only knew one cousin." And he told him, "How many times have you seen that cousin in the last 2 years?" And so this was the atmosphere just before
That's interesting.
The war started. I'm not trying to say that Gaza was
a paradise,
not a prison. It was a prison, and they are hostages, and they are and they don't have much choice. But people do carve themselves. Since you are about voices of war, it's a very interesting theme, by the way, because very few people understand war if they haven't lived through it. People do carve themselves a space during the war where they can ignore it, especially if it's a long one.
It's their way to retain sanity and connect and to others.
Yes.
And of course, Beirut has experienced that, and Sarajevo, of course, has, and I know certainly.
Yes, we had the best parties during the war in the basement.
That's my dad says the same thing. I mean, he's been on the front lines for 3.5 years, but he often would reflect and say that those years, despite the fact that his wife and 2 sons were away in Germany as refugees, those are still some of the most vivid memories of a sense of purpose, of collective enduring, of everybody sharing and coming together. I mean, they dug a well because there was no water, a 7-meter deep well in winter. They had a communal garden, these kinds of things that of course, besides all the killing and the death, there were moments that he even reflects now on fondly as some of the most, dare I say, I don't want to tarnish it with a wrong brush, but some of the most memorable, is certainly joyous moments of his life, despite the fact that they were in the middle of a war zone or under siege. So that really resonates.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject, another thing about war. I mean, you made me think about these things. I hadn't thought about them before, but another thing about it's almost like there is a state of war. It's like a switch, and when it's over, the switch is switched off. And people go back to normal life, normal relations with those you considered as enemies, and that's why when we get to the differences between our peace process and your peace process in Sarajevo, this is a relevant factor, because in the Dayton Agreement, they froze the situation of conflict as though it's permanent.
Yeah, I mean, maybe let's get to that now, because I mean we're kind of talking about it anyway, and it will allow us to open up the conversation as it relates to what's happening on the ground now. So maybe give us some context, because you have spent some time in Sarajevo.
Well, I'll tell you. Yes, I mean, I've spent not enough time in Sarajevo, but it was quite intense, because I went with a group of with an institution called the Arab Reform Initiative with a group of Syrian opposition people.
Okay.
And we met, we had 2 days of discussions with people from civil society in Sarajevo. And I was there, I was at Chatham House, and I was there as a Lebanese expert on Lebanon, if you like, and they were friends anyway, so they invited me. And it was to talk about the Taif agreement. And the best way I can explain it is that, you see, we are children of empire, and empires rule over many nations. So in a city like Beirut or Sarajevo, during times of empire, there are many nations who live together in that city. And you have centuries of coexistence and of interaction between families, personal relations, and sometimes relations across communities are better than within communities. People forget that there is also rivalry within communities that are sometimes even more intense than across communities. And the way these cities are constructed is there are quarters. You have the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, the Turkish quarter, the Kurds, in your case, probably the Serbs.
Yeah, that's right. The Orthodox, the Catholic. That's right. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the interaction happens in the common areas. And at night they can go to their area and be different people.
Yeah.
So you have a dual. You almost have a schizophrenic. You need a certain degree of hypocrisy to
coexist. Yeah.
And you perfect it. You can't teach it to people.
Yeah.
And foreigners never understand it.
And that's context. That's context, and that's nuance.
Yes.
Which is why people don't.
Yeah, it's impossible to explain it to anyone who doesn't experience it. How can you have so much prejudice and so much coexistence and so much love sometimes in the same context?
And how overnight it can shift. So it can literally shift overnight.
Overnight. Overnight, it can shift to very brutal. Freud calls it the narcissism of small differences. I think he uses Serbs and Croats as an example.
Yeah.
That they even have the same mustache. But it's very intense. Intense conflict between them. So yes, it does switch off. So the difference between our agreement and the Dayton Agreement is that the Dayton Agreement takes the situation of conflict and freezes.
It's a ceasefire. It's not a peace agreement. It's a ceasefire.
It's a ceasefire, but it freezes the separation. And when we were in Sarajevo, the people there, the activists, said that it's not us. What the result is not us. We do not have the prerogative to do joint cross-communal political programs and projects and all that because the Dayton Agreement freezes the separation between us. It becomes more internal politics.
Right.
And whereas in Lebanon, we switched off, literally, forgot that there was ever a war, produced an amnesty to all that happened before that war, and continued as though nothing happened, with a small fine-tuning on the power sharing arrangement.
Right. Just again, many of our listeners or viewers might not have sufficient understanding of the Lebanese civil war, perhaps not even the Bosnian one. So can you just give us the wave tops? Because it was quite a long war. It's not we're not talking a couple of years. We're talking, I think it was 15 years.
15, yes. But in fact, and if you want to get into the zoom into the details, it was not a civil war all the time, because it was I mean, some Lebanese also deny that it was ever a civil war.
Yeah, yeah,
in a
yeah.
sense, but it was.
It's the same in Bosnia.
It
Yeah,
was different
yeah,
visions, different views, and um, um, in a nutshell, a lot of the war was internal within each community because of the Syrian takeover of the country. So there was a lot of there were Syrian factions, even amongst the Palestinians. There were pro-PLO factions and pro-Syrian factions.
This is in Lebanon as well, right? So these are the Palestinian refugees, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So well, it's not just Palestinian refugees. The PLO,
Of course,
set up
yeah.
a state. It was a state within a
Of course,
state.
yeah.
In Lebanon, and it was the capital of global revolutionaries because you had Carlos the Jackal and the Badr Meinhof and the Italian Red Army and the Red Brigade and the Sandinistas and Iranian exiles, and so this was very intense place intellectually during the Civil War. I've met some of the people who were, I've spoken to some of the people who were here about the interactions between the different revolutionaries and how there was a rift between the Northerners, the Germans and the Italians and the British and the Irish and the Southerners along the lines of tiers-mondisme.
Okay.
They lived it. We read it
in books and
textbooks, but they lived. They actually lived it.
Yeah.
And the Iranian Revolution, in a sense. I mean, we're digressing, but the Iranian Revolution took a lot from here, because a lot of the exiles were in Lebanon.
And why was Lebanon such a breeding ground, I guess, for what was it about Lebanon?
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to digress too much because I think all of this matters as we link it. Yeah,
it's all connected. Yeah. It's all relevant. So if I wanted to explain Lebanon in one sentence, I would say that Lebanon is a country that skipped the 20th century. The 20th century is about creating homogeneous, nationalist, strong states which are sovereign and
decolonized, etc. Yeah,
where you and where you have one language, one religion, one culture, one identity. Atatürk, the Turkish laïcité model.
Yeah.
Which is
the Turkish Republic.
Which is easy to achieve. Which is easy to achieve, and some people idealize it. But you have to massacre the Armenians first, and kick out the Greeks, and suppress the Kurds. And brainwash 2 or 3 generations with the dictatorship that imposes on you a new language, forgets 500 years of history. So we didn't do that.
Yeah, okay.
All the countries in the region did that. We absorbed the cosmopolitan Levantine spirit of the region in one place. So Beirut inherited that culture of the cosmopolitan culture, a non-nationalist. And as a result, it attracted most of the intellectuals and business people and merchant families from the region. So think of a place like Alexandria, which was a cosmopolitan city in Ottoman times. Comes Nasser and defines Arab identity as a rigid thing, which in a way excludes the Greeks of Alexandria, who have probably been there in a continuous presence since the days of Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
So suddenly they become alien.
Yeah.
Because it's a nationalist.
It's a shift.
And so they come to Lebanon. Some of them go to Greece, and they can't live in Greece because it's a homogeneous place.
Yeah.
They need you sometimes need people to look down on.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, but that's a psychological factor, right, of us and them, right? That's a really
Yes, yeah.
amongst
No,
people, among
but it
social
all
groups. Yeah.
if you're used to a cosmopolitan existence
Mm.
and a multicultural existence, it's very difficult
To go to a homogeneous
to
one.
live
Yeah.
in a very boring, homogeneous place where uh, people are clones of each other, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. That makes absolute sense.
so we attracted people from a lot of people from southern Turkey, um, from Egypt, of course, from Palestine. The elite of Palestine came to Lebanon,
Mm.
the bankers and the contractors, and so if from Syria, from Iraq, from the whole region. That so Beirut was a vibrant place in terms of art, uh, and music and culture and cafes.
I mean, you're describing
And
Sarajevo. I mean, I find the
yeah,
parallels just
very,
incredible.
very different from the rigid nationalism. Well, we had corruption in the good sense of the word.
Yeah.
Rather because
Things were getting done.
Yes, and in Orwell's 1984, corruption is freedom in a sense, because an authoritarian regime puts down the rules and imposes the language and the ideas, and any departure from that is corruption. So we were corrupt to the core.
Right. Okay.
Because we had no.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the best example is that I'm sure there is the same in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, that the Lebanese have attribute the collapse of the state to the lack of nationalism. And they say, we don't have a common history. Each one has a different story. What is this? You need to create a homogeneous textbook which unifies the history, so that all the students in universities and in schools learn the same history. That would prevent conflict. That's very common discussion in Lebanon. And I once in Oxford, we had a conference on Lebanese history, and they were discussing this, and there was a Turkish historian there, from Brown University from the States, who explained that he was sacked from his job. He lost his job. He was almost put in jail, and he was persecuted because he dared teach critically the common history book. So if you define a history as a unifying factor and to maintain civil peace and security, then if you dare question it, you are first of all, you're corrupt.
And
second of all, you are creating division, and it's an attempt on national security and cohesiveness of the nation. You see, so we were not like that, and it's that kind of freedom in Lebanon, with a very weak state institutions. We only had an army for parade. Very nice uniforms, because around us there was a deliberate anti-military
feeling and vibe, culture.
Feeling, for two reasons. One of them is that the military were really native, in the sense that they were the real Lebanese, the military, whereas the elite was cosmopolitan. The elite was from different areas, so there was a cultural difference between that, and there was a precedent of the military taking over in the whole region. Actually, at the time, it was a global fashion. From Latin America to Pakistan, you had people in military uniform taking over, and juntas. So the way to avoid this is
to create a clear separation.
Quickly, and keep it very very small and weak, the state. But the other side of this is that kind of freedom also allows for the PLO to come and set up
Yeah,
shop.
yeah.
Especially that the half the population were in sympathy with the PLO.
Yeah. Because
part of that division.
Yeah. And how does then Hezbollah come into the picture? Because Hezbollah is a political movement as well as a military faction.
Absolutely.
So how does that come into the picture?
Okay. Now, this is also a fascinating story, because when you live in a multicultural space, each group have their different regional affiliation and their different historical references. And the Shia of Lebanon.
No, that's fine. No problem.
This is I switched
no
it
problem.
off.
No problem at all.
So the Shia of Lebanon are part of experienced the same Shiite revival, the phenomenon of Shiite revival from the 50s and 60s that happened in Iran and in Iraq and after the Mossadegh revolution. So this is not shutting up.
You're a wanted man.
I thought I'd switch. The main division is that in Shiite Islam, there is a culture of suffering, and you're supposed to suffer quietly until it's called quietism, until the hidden imam comes back. It's sort of messianic. Yeah. So the hidden imam will come back and establish justice.
Yeah.
On earth. Now, this means that if you are a quietist, a 12er, you have to wait for the hidden imam to come. You have to wait for the return to establish justice. It also means that it's futile to try and establish justice before the hidden imam comes. And if you try and participate in politics, it means that your faith in the hidden imam's return is a bit shaky.
Right.
So the clergy were the mainstream of the clergy were quietists in Iran at the time, and in Najaf in Iraq, where
the main center is, and of course the annual pilgrimage to Najaf.
But young people were, imagine yourself in the 50s with the rise of nationalism, with all these ideas floating, and your clergy is telling you that you should just pray and not participate in politics, and all these revolutions happening
and to stand by and watch.
So there was a movement in which was across the board, which was a kind of rebellion against quietism, which was represented by, which is called the Shiite revival, political revival, where they started participating in politics, and many of them were kicked out of Iran and spread all over the world. Many went to Paris, to Egypt, to Iraq, to Syria, Lebanon.
Right.
And then eventually, when it wasn't so healthy to be in Syria or in Iraq under Saddam, or places like, or in Egypt, where you were being also there was not enough freedom. They all conglomerated to Lebanon, where one of their classmates, one of their movement, was appointed as the head of the Shiite council in Lebanon, Imam Musa Sadr. So Imam Sadr is a key figure in this. It's a family that originates from Lebanon, that emigrated to Iran to spread the Shiite faith in Safavid times.
Right.
So this is there are the relations.
The dense links. Yeah.
Very dense links, and this is what happens in a multicultural environment. They have links, we don't. This is their links. This is not our links. and they're experiencing a revival we're not, or we're experiencing a different revival, which is more connected to if you're a Christian, to secular movements within the Christian world, or to nationalist movements in the region, and so when you're in an environment where you respect multiculturalism, you give it freedom of expression, and you don't clash with it, because if they believe in the imam, let them believe in their imam.
And if it's coexistence, right, without violence, if it's coexistence, then it's
exactly. So this brings even a worse thing, which is compromise. So when the PLO was kicked out of Jordan, they were kicked out of Egypt, kicked out of Jordan, kicked out of Syria, and they ended up in Beirut with the support of at least half the population. You compromise. You don't put the supporters of the PLO in jail, because they especially the Sunni population, were taken by the nationalist revival of Nasser. It was not exclusively Sunni. It's not that clear-cut sectarian, but you in a way accept, even if you don't accept the idea, you accept that they believe that, and you make a compromise. On it. So that's how the PLO became
embedded,
so central, and that's embedded. And the Shiite movements in Lebanon were very close to Iran. I mean, the Amal movement was created by Mustafa Shamran, who was an exile from Iran in Lebanon, and who went back to Iran and became the first defense minister under Khomeini.
Right.
So that's how close.
Right.
And the military training that these people got was with the PLO in Lebanon.
Right.
And the ideological training was with that toxic mixture of revolutionaries.
Right.
Which included liberation theology from the Latin Americans. So you have Marxists becoming Islamists. I mean, there is even one example in Lebanon of a Palestinian Christian who was a Marxist who founded an Islamist party in Tripoli.
Right.
I think he's still alive.
Right.
I have his memoir. So that kind of a travesty, which you can't even invent in fiction, existed in. And in Lebanon, we in a way we like the freedom, we enjoy the freedom, and when it gets out of control, we accept the authoritarianism of either the army or Syrian presence. But then when that gets too much, we reject it again.
Right.
So you have like a pendulum swinging from complete anarchy and chaos, which we love, to insecurity, which makes us accept, for example, in 1958, after the first clash over Nasserism, we accepted an army general as a president.
Right.
Yeah, which was fashionable. I mean, it was in tune with global fashion at the time.
But it sounds like a really interesting place.
But now
the balance, and it strikes me as a place that's
imbalance.
Well, I guess exactly the
constant,
in a world of order, chaos rules, right? And that's what that seems like, right? Because there is an order, a deeply intertwined cultural, nuanced order that exists that allowed the place to be, dare I say, the hippie of the Middle East, in the sense that it was so liberated, both in its intellectual capacity and freedom, but also on the other side in this kind of rebellion / resistance to authoritarianism, which is why the link you made to the revolutionaries I found really interesting, and I never knew that it was Baramanov,
and prosperity and prosperity. I mean, you have the Levantine merchants and bankers who came from Aleppo
right,
or from Mosul, were part of the trade route to India, and the ones that came from Alexandria and Cairo were people who had taken part in very sophisticated global financial transactions during the building of the Suez Canal,
right,
during the Khedival, the debts of the ruler for the Sudan campaign, for example. So they would trade international bonds, and whereas in Beirut at the same time they were just small trading houses that dealt with the silk production and some
right.
agricultural. It wasn't so. What the immigrants brought with
it expanded
was far more sophisticated than what we.
So why is Lebanon experiencing such economic strife over the more recent past, given its kind of eclectic, colorful history, design, openness, etc.? Why is Lebanon where it is at the moment? And perhaps you can even give us a quick summary as to where Lebanon is at the moment economically.
Well, Lebanon is now in complete paralysis. We have no president, no government, no parliament, no central bank governor. Very soon we will have no army chief. So it's a complete collapse of the whole state institutions through paralysis. And the paralysis is created mainly by Hezbollah, in the same way as maybe Hamas took over Gaza, Hezbollah took over here, but a different context. But since 2005, it's been assassinations, triggering wars. So I wrote a piece comparing what's happened in Gaza now with the 2006
I'll link that to this.
That was triggered by
really
Hezbollah. Hezbollah in 2006 was in a corner, in a sense, because we were telling Hezbollah, I mean, the conversation, if you like, was that's it. There's no more need for a resistance. The Israelis withdrew in 2000. We give you credit, you liberated, and we accept all this. You never contradict the national narrative of your partner. And the Syrians withdrew also. So let's turn the page and rebuild the country. And by triggering the war, they reestablished their
political credentials.
Their presence.
Yeah.
Political presence. Because if I was speaking to a Hezbollah person and telling him, listen, the UN has issued 7 Security Council resolutions for Lebanese sovereignty and security in the last 6 months, and the United States and Europe and the EU and France and the Arab League are all in support of Lebanon, and the Syrians have been forced to withdraw. Let's build a new country. We don't need the arms anymore. By provoking the war, he tells, just 1 week after the war, he would tell you, okay, Israel is still a threat. The United States supported Israel. The EU supported Israel. And the UN is powerless. And the Arab League is powerless. So it managed to regain the legitimacy of the arms and gradually took over the country through paralysis, through assassinations, through maintaining a constant state of war.
Because I guess in 2006, and just to kind of zero in on that a little bit, it can be said that Hezbollah technically won against Israel. As much as Israel overwhelmed But
Well, in this, Hezbollah won against Israel in the same way as Hamas has won.
It produced, it
Now,
caused a reaction that then
yes,
forced Israel
but
to
we paid the
overreact.
price.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever happens, Hamas will declare victory. But the people who paid the price are the civilians in Gaza.
Yeah.
We paid the price in that the country was destroyed. But Hezbollah declares victory.
Yeah. Can I just on the link between the two? I mean, and again, something that's kind of already come out, but as you mentioned, Hezbollah has got deep Shiite roots, far deeper than I realized, and the density between Hezbollah and Iran is far denser than I realized. But then, of course, Hamas is Sunni, which
Hamas is Sunni and deeply ingrained in the
Muslim
Brotherhood,
right. So
which
competing
are,
tracks,
competing tracks.
Okay, so maybe rationalize that for us, because that's perhaps something that's
very easy.
Yeah, okay.
It's very easy. In 1992, Israel rounded up all the senior Hamas leaders, 400 of them, and kicked them out of the country, exiled them across the Lebanese border. So they established camp in South Lebanon for a whole year.
Right.
And that's where they bonded with Hezbollah.
That's the revolutionary brotherhood, right?
That's the brotherhood.
Right. And common enemy.
Otherwise, but I mean, now there are two factions in Gaza. One of them is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is part of Khomeini's export of the revolution.
And again, Shia, right? If I understand that correctly.
No, they are. They're not Shia. They're Sunni. Okay. Sunnis who drank the Kool-Aid of
Khomeini.
Khomeini.
Okay,
yes.
Right.
And there was always tensions with Hamas on that, and there was a serious rift between them, between Hamas and Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran during the Syrian revolution, because the Muslim Brotherhood element in Syria was anti-Assad and Hezbollah was helping Assad. And the Hamas was helping the Muslim Brotherhood with digging. They taught them how to dig tunnels, and they taught them tactics and gave them technology that they had learned from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And at the time, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard elements thought that Hamas was treason, that they were selling, they were communicating the technology that they had taught them to fight them. So there was a lot of tension, but then this was sorted out because they needed the money and they needed the support. So all this talk that Iran had nothing to do with it, and the attack had nothing to do with Iran, and this is purely a Palestinian resistance matter. It's I don't know what's the acceptable word for bullshit in podcasts.
But you nailed it. Yes. Right. Well, that's interesting. I mean, because that is a narrative that's dare I say taken hold, especially since Hassan Nasrallah's speech last Friday, which was very much awaited by the world to gauge where Hezbollah sits.
Very, very, very clever PR.
Right. Okay, that's interesting, because, and I think maybe if you don't mind, it might be worthwhile delving into that, because he was, some might say, fairly explicit in saying that this was a Palestinian thing, and that Hezbollah stands ready to go, but Hezbollah doesn't want to, in not so many words, or in far more words. But also, many analysts have drawn links to 2006, where he also came out and said that had he known what was going to happen, i.e., had he anticipated the wrath that Israel was going to exact on the civilians of Lebanon, he would have made
Yes.
another decision.
That's a similar adjective to. I mean,
Right,
that's
right,
also
okay. So
yes.
again, this is the PR
Because
stunt.
I mean, if you cross the border and you kill 8 soldiers and you kidnap
Mm.
2, and when you go back you start throwing katyushas at Israel, what do you expect Israel to do? I mean,
Yeah.
it was a deliberate provocation of
Mm.
war, and they succeeded in it, and this was the objective, and the objective was to cause as much civilian
Yeah.
casualties as possible to gain the sympathy of
Yeah.
the Arab world. Nasrallah became the hero in the Gulf, in North Africa,
Right.
at Columbia University,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
everywhere.
So what does Hezbollah want out of this right now? I mean, given what's happening, and that, one of the big fears is, and why many are saying that the US has bolstered its presence in the region, is that there is a risk of serious escalation, and Hezbollah is, I guess, trying to play the game.
Yeah.
We've seen an increase in missiles being launched, and between Israel and Hezbollah, but many are sort of saying, well, it's within the kind of accepted, normalized
Yes.
state of war.
That's what you say when
Right.
you don't.
So
Yeah.
so
Yes.
yeah.
But each side can escalate at any moment by saying that this was like 1
Yeah, too
millimeter
far. Yeah.
beyond
Too many died,
to,
because soldiers are dying, certainly on the Israeli
yeah,
side, but of course
or
civilian and Hezbollah fighters. I think in the 60s.
Hezbollah fighters were
Yeah.
quite a lot of Hezbollah fighters. If you accept that in 2006 the number was below 200, 60 is now 1/3 of 2006. It's quite a lot. But also, I mean, there were also hundreds, or the figure is accepted figure is about 3,000 Hezbollah fighters who died in Syria
Right.
too,
Okay.
during the Syrian
War. Yeah.
war. I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, one way of understanding this is that it is a game between someone who plays chess and someone who plays
Okay.
poker. So it's the Americans play
Okay.
poker. They're in cowboy movies, in the saloon, they play poker. So in a poker game, every hand is separate. You can win one and you can lose one, and you can withdraw at any time. There is no end game. You see, so in the American mind, there is absolutely no connection between what they're doing in Iraq and what they're doing in Syria, on the Palestinian issue, and Afghanistan and Russia. And whereas if you're a chess player, you would know that if America withdraws from Afghanistan, this is a sign for Putin that he can invade Ukraine, and that if you withdraw from Iraq and you allow the Russians to bombard Aleppo, you give them the green light physically to bombard Aleppo, because you don't want to disrupt your discussions with on the JCPOA with Iran. If this is you're focused
on your hand, you're focused on the hand that you're playing.
You don't see the connections.
Yeah.
You're focused on the hand that you're playing. You don't. But if you're a chess player, then you see the whole board, and you move one. You can sacrifice one of your pawns, and you keep the others for another move. So if you've made one move from one of your pawns, which is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas, and you sacrificed Hamas in that, and you sacrificed the people of Gaza, but that's a small detail,
mere numbers in a historical context.
We are here for the grand God.
For judgment day, right? Which is a much
of doing checkmate to the US. I mean, we want to kick out the United States from the region and from the Gulf, and take over. And if you look at the where the oil is in the Gulf, It's in the eastern province in Saudi Arabia, which is Shia. It's in the south of Iraq, which is Shia. It's in Bahrain, which they consider Shia, and it's in Kuwait, which is half Shia. So what is at stake is control of the whole region, overthrowing all the Gulf countries, which they have already surrounded, because they control Yemen, and they control Iraq, and they control Syria, and there's a stalemate in Bahrain. So if you look at it as a chess game, then you can understand the relevance of hitting of the operation, of the Gaza operation, which sacrificed the people of Gaza and Hamas as a pawn.
To achieve what end state? What is the move? That's what many are asking, because
Well, and you have, at the same time, you have maintained all your other chessmen to send signals. There's been attacks from the Houthis in Iraq, in Syria, on American bases, and you're telling the opponent, listen, you want to fight, I can ignite the whole area.
Yeah, you're moving your pieces, you're positioning them than.
And you blackmail the Gulf countries, because the Gulf countries rely on American protection. In 1990, Saddam Hussein met with the American ambassador, with the American envoy, April Glaspie, and she either hesitated or scratched her nose when he asked her about the American position on the border issue with Kuwait. And she said, we regard this as an internal matter, not very convincingly. He invaded Iraq the second day. He invaded Kuwait the second day. I mean, Kuwait disappeared just like that because of a hesitation. So what happened in the last few years is that the Iranians have been testing the ground. They bombed oil installations, Aramco oil installations in Khubar in Saudi Arabia, and they bombed in Abu Dhabi near the airport, and they sent drones to take selfies over Dubai or something like that. And the United States ignored it completely. So the United States showed itself to be an unreliable security guarantor, and that's why the Saudis have approached the Chinese to do a deal with the Iranians, and because their real security guarantee is not
reliable,
is no longer valid. There is no trust in American, and there's still no trust. I mean, I am nobody in the region is sure what's going to happen next year during the elections, and whether the Americans will just drop everything and withdraw because the polls show something. And it's done it before.
Well, I mean, it's also no secret.
So that's the kind of game.
I mean, it's no secret that and also the US is very much focused on China as the big piece, and they don't want to be bogged down in the Middle East or in Ukraine.
And the US doesn't see the connection that if you show weakness in the Middle East, that weakness is interpreted as weakness, and there's a higher threat to Taiwan because of that weakness you show in the Middle East, or because of the weakness you show in Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine was a mistake from the Americans. Ukraine was a show of weakness, which probably someone like Putin interpreted as an invitation to take Ukraine. I mean, the very fact that the Americans and the EU met to threaten Putin with sanctions and if he invades Ukraine, and they couldn't agree on sanctions, meant that there was no threat. And then President Biden issues an invitation to Vladimir Zelensky that he offers to evacuate him and his family and the dog and the cat to a safe place, which means he's already declared the battle lost before it started. If I were to put myself in the shoes of someone like Putin, I would consider
it's a done deal.
I'm free to enter.
Yeah.
It's a done deal. Yeah. So that's I've never understood why the Americans are so clever and so dumb at the same time.
Right.
They're very smart people. I mean, Washington D.C. with the universities, with the think tanks, with $500 million. I mean, with the budgets you have for intelligence and for diplomacy and for research and for all that, with probably the highest concentration of PhDs per square inch anywhere in the world, people from Harvard and Princeton and Columbia and from everywhere, and what they produce is, I mean, any taxi driver in Sarajevo will tell you that.
We'll give you a better analysis on what's actually happening. No, that's true. Oftentimes, because those very same taxi drivers have a couple of PhDs anyway, and there's really no jobs for them in a place like Sarajevo. No, but I mean, I cannot express how much I love the fact that you can just dip in from region to region and connect the entire chessboard. Because, I mean, what we're seeing now is obviously potentially a significant move, of course, by Hamas, which is provoking a response by Israel. And the calls on Israel.
Yeah, but it's a move by Iran to sabotage rapprochement between the
and
Saudis
Israel.
And the Saudis. I mean, so when the dust settles and people re-examine them, there's an evaluation of what happened. Where did we go wrong? I am sure that the Gulf states will realize that making the Abraham Accords and rapprochement with Israel while ignoring the Palestinian cause was a mistake.
Which is what and let's be fair. Also, Netanyahu pushed that, right? I mean, he's pushed that agenda that.
No, it's not just. No, it's even more complicated. It's a totally different story, in the sense that, you see, there was a clash between Arab activists and Palestinians.
Okay.
During the Arab Spring. So in the Arab Spring, if you're an Arab activist, you're rebelling against Gaddafi and Mubarak and Assad and Iraq. I mean, you're rebelling against an establishment that is built on the 1960s nationalist struggle against imperialism and against Zionism and all that, and using that as an excuse to suppress you
and to kill en masse.
The 1960s,
in some instances,
to kill you. So in the 1960s, the most of the liberal constitutions of the region were suspended, and there was a state of emergency that was established in 63, 64 in Egypt and in Iraq and in Syria and all that, because of the need for the battle, because we're in an emergency battle situation, and no sound can be above the battlefield. And if you protest against anything in Syria or in Libya or whatever, you're a Zionist agent. So when you're rebelling against an edifice that uses these words and these nationalist ideas to suppress you, you're rebelling against the ideas too. So the revolutionaries in the Arab Spring were rebelling against the anti-Zionist struggle.
So the core identity of some of these leaders and nationalists who
even in Iran, you could see that during the 2009 revolt and during the current revolt, they did not burn American flags or Israeli flags, and when the regime put Israeli flags and American flags on the floor, they were around it. They don't step on them. So they're rebelling against that.
I saw that even recently. Somewhere in Iran, I think. Yeah.
Last year, it happened last year, and it happened in 2009. It happened in Iraq before. It happened in Syria. In the whole Arab Spring in Syria, there wasn't a single American flag burned, or Israeli flag burned. So this is the mindset of the Arab Spring young generation, which while the Palestinian activists are still in the old nationalist, anti-imperialist. So you have a revolutionary mindset against a resistance mindset, global resistance mindset, with different allies, different values, and there was a genuine marginalization of the Palestinian cause. The Palestinians, in a way, alienated a lot of the young revolutionaries that wanted change in the region, because they were perceived to be supporters of Saddam Hussein in Iraq and in Kuwait, and supporters of Assad in Syria, and supporters of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Right.
Who are on the
kind of radicalized, more nationalistic track.
So they were wrong in doing this, but they were not wrong in interpreting that the Palestinian cause was not as hot
as it the reason I brought in Netanyahu in this is because the way I and certainly others have read, his recent speech at the UN General Assembly, where he posted the map, of the entire region as Israel. Yeah. He's very distinctly, and you know this far better than I do. Anything he posts in that kind of a forum is very well designed and well planned. And he's made the call so publicly that he's ignoring the Palestinian question because he's building it from top down. He's building alliances and peace with the broader region, who will then hopefully force the Palestinians to accept peace as an option. But the Palestinian question, in his mind, was a solved thing and want to be suppressed, which of course, as we've now seen, it really isn't. So
with the support of the
Arab countries. Yes, who were happy with the rapprochement.
He felt that he had the support
and Hamas, in many ways, for all the horrors that's taken, that they've done, some would argue are certainly have pushed the Palestinian cause back into the front and center of the current, to the point where someone like Biden will come out and say that a two-state solution must be in the future of this.
And they have sabotaged all the Gulf efforts of rapprochement with Israel. And what Israel is doing now is a threat to all the regimes in the region, because it will awaken the Muslim Brotherhood elements to rebel again in Egypt, in Jordan, and in some of the Gulf countries. And in Kuwait, especially in Kuwait, where they have a presence.
In your view, then, what could have Israel done? And this is a question that's asked often. I mean, they are receiving a lot of criticism. I say rightly, because what's happening in Gaza is just unconscionable, in my view. Also, as a military mind, I can't ever justify collateral damage to that extent, regardless of what you might achieve militarily. To trade the lives of one Hamas leader for hundreds of civilians is just,
Absolutely.
And I think the
civilians and hospitals, and
even if they're used as caches or whatever,
and they say that, and they use the cliche, well, they voted for Hamas,
or it's being used as a weapon storage facility, or as a command center, etc. So even if all of that is true, I still cannot accept that we are at a place as a world that it's okay to bomb a hospital, even if under that hospital there is a command center of sorts. as a, I cannot accept that is the status quo. That is okay. So given the fact that Israel had to respond, what do you think could have been a better way to deal with? Of course, Hamas. They had to do something. So what do you think would have been a better way to go, so they don't fall into the trap that you so eloquently described?
I mean, honestly, I don't think there was any alternative but to attack because of internal reasons. That's that. But I'll tell you what has changed radically in Israel. In 20 years ago, we thought that the Jewish diaspora was radical, and the Israelis the Israelis were divided with the peace movement. They were, they were eating falafel and hummus. They were becoming, they were. And
some of the greatest exports, right?
Joint projects.
Yeah.
There were lots of joint projects. They were integrating in the region and building bonds with Palestinians, and there was internal protest against in Israel, whereas the diaspora was fully very extreme. I mean, people who used to make the caricature that yes, these the settlers, the extremist settlers, they're fresh out of Brooklyn. They're not. They don't understand. Now this has been reversed. Now Israel has moved to the far right, with hardly any peace movement to take into consideration, especially after this now. But the Jewish diaspora has become has awoken in a sense. And I think this will have a big impact.
Right.
I mean, I was in the United States for 7 years. I was in a university in Boston for 4, and I can tell you that the students especially the Jewish students associations in the universities in the Boston area, were deeply divided between those who were pro-Israel and those who were critical of Israel. And there were very intense clashes between them. And some of them were, the Palestinian students who were there were studying engineering or medicine and wanted to. The real intense clashes were between Jewish groups, between Jewish student groups. So 15 years ago, AIPAC had complete control of the diaspora. This was broken in around 2010, I think, with the creation of J Street by Daniel Levy and like that. So J Street was a sort of the beginning of a progressive Zionist organization, more liberal. Students now in the Boston area consider J Street as conservative.
Okay.
What 15 years ago was extremely progressive.
Wow.
In a diaspora context is now considered as.
So what is the solution from the current progressives, as you see? I mean, that is.
So I think that the relationship between the diaspora and Israel has changed, and they will have an influence after this in balancing the views. I mean, that's the optimistic view, of course.
So perhaps a more tactical question, I suppose, but yeah.
And to answer your other question, sorry, before that, I think that the alternative would have been to go to the Arab countries. I mean, President Biden, instead of going to Jerusalem and throwing oil over the fire and repeating false rumors about about the babies and stuff like that, to inflame things more, he should have flown to Riyadh or to Abu Dhabi and gotten the help the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, Egypt, Jordan, who are as much threatened by what Hamas has done as Israel is. And it's existential for the whole region. And the region is at a crossroad between being militant war resistance mode to the new generation who I mean, like in Saudi Arabia, they're making a huge transformation in societies, and in Dubai, and so that agenda of creating a peaceful, stable region, prosperous region, which Hamad bin Salman of Saudi Arabia described as the new Europe. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's where the mood is. And let's make peace with Israel. Let's normalize. And then they were ready to invest a lot in Palestine, and which the Qataris are doing already, and the Emiratis are doing already.
Just on that investment piece,
all of that has been diverted to militant war and destruction and fundamentalism. It's a big thing, and they all have a stake in it. So instead, Israel did the very understandable reaction of saying that post Holocaust and post all that trauma, that only Jews can protect Jews, and the state of Israel cannot rely on all these. There's a whole tradition of security, and this has been broken. I mean, I don't know how they will reestablish the feeling of security. The whole of northern Galilee has been depopulated. People will not return unless there is security established. People can emigrate, reverse Aliyah. This is a nightmare.
Well, especially given the government and Netanyahu in particular's stance on security, and he's built his entire legacy around taking a hard line against terror groups, Hamas, etc. But also there is a perhaps a sinister or dark side to this, and that is that and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this, that apparently, and there are apparently records of this, where Netanyahu has publicly said to members of his party that if you want to abolish the idea of a two-state solution, then you need to support Hamas. So you need to understand that Hamas is an ally in this project, which is perhaps why, as some are saying, the funding that was given through Qatar directly to Hamas by Israel was to bolster and also therefore divide the cohesion between Palestinians, because, and of course then you have a terrorist organization, and no one will put pressure on Israel to negotiate with terrorists, i.e. Hamas. So therefore, it's a useful idiot to have in Gaza, because you therefore deny, and we know this from Netanyahu and his faction anyway, that the two-state solution was never really on the agenda. So how does that play into the next stage? Because again, many analysts are saying that his days are numbered. Yeah.
Well, people are talking about the two-state solution again, and that you cannot have a partial solution. You cannot have normalization with Israel without resolving the fundamental. You see, peace is to militias like Hezbollah and Hamas. Peace is like garlic.
It's bad for business,
vampires.
Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's bad for business. So the only way you cannot abolish, you cannot kill ideas. What the Israelis are trying to do in Gaza is completely absurd. They will strengthen the idea rather than they will give it more strength. They cannot kill Hamas. they will strengthen it.
Especially when there's so many young, especially young men in Gaza. I mean, it's like
if you are a young man in Gaza who was against Hamas because you want to live a normal life, you want to make peace, you want to go on, you want to travel, you want to get an education, you don't want to study Quran instead. Now you could be recruited
because now
Hamas.
Your family was deleted,
after what's happened.
Whole livelihood.
And the same with people in Egypt, in Jordan, in the Gulf, in Indonesia.
That's right.
In Pakistan, in suburbs of Detroit.
Which is why I think calling this a trap is such an apt word. A trap that Israel probably knowingly walks into, but is driven by emotion and rage and a sense of helplessness. And therefore, as you rightly said, I think they couldn't do anything else. And I think Yuval Noah Harari puts this beautifully. And I don't know if you're familiar with some of his thinking of late.
Yes, of course, yes. He's Lebanese, by the way.
What? I did not know that. Really?
His family comes from.
There you go. Wow. That's okay.
Yes.
But I think.
I don't know what he's doing in Israel.
He's making a lot of sense, I think, because one of the things most wonderfully he puts as a historian, that both Palestinians and Israelis are too deeply emotional, too deeply involved in this right now, and they need the help from the world.
They need an
to
outside
guide this.
Yes, you need a yes. So that's why I think the wise thing for President Biden, for the EU people to do what would have been to also visit the Gulf countries and visit Amman and visit. There was an organization of Islamic countries meeting in Riyadh that day. It was at the level of foreign ministers, but it would have been brilliant to have Biden there and address them that this is a common cause against terrorism.
That's right.
That this is a threat to peace, a threat to everyone, that this is not directed against Islam. Because if you listen to Israelis now, it is a clash against Islam.
This
is the dominant.
And also would have, I guess,
If I want to radicalize.
Exactly,
If you want to radicalize someone, don't try and indoctrinate them. Just tell them, go and listen to a Twitter space by Israelis, what they're saying. And
they will do the job. And also, I mean, had they used the region, it would have stilled perhaps Israel's own fears that they are alone. Because understandably, they would feel that they are alone, surrounded by enemies who can turn on them on a dime. And
it's awakened
anxieties and fears,
insecurity, and globally. Globally, people in London are worried about sending their children to school, sending their walking in the street. This thing needs to be put under control, and it needs a responsible, wise statesman to do it globally, not.
What do you make of Blinken's efforts? Because he's doing what you've described. He's kind of doing the rounds.
Absurd request by Blinken. I'm very surprised by him thinking that he could take the people of Gaza, transport them out, and distribute them between Turkey and Egypt and Jordan. It shows complete ignorance of what it means to
the region,
and for him to be saying that and proposing it to Israel, and even for Israelis to think that, given the history,
and again, that's why I thought it was really poignant that again this is awakening things regionally that we don't necessarily always understand. But when Netanyahu calls this the second war of independence, making a reference to the first war of independence, which of course is the Nakba in the right.
Unfinished
business. And Nakba, of course, is a trauma of 750,000 pushed into exile. and if he's calling the war in Gaza is the second war of independence, then the fear of the Palestinians is understandable. That then will never be. If they go to Egypt, if Egypt opens the border, they will never come back.
They will never come back.
So again, that is an understandable fear, especially given the language and who it's coming from.
And especially that now we know from the Israeli historians themselves, like Benny Morris and Ilan Pape and Israel Gershoni and all these people, that the atrocities committed during the Nakba were deliberate to frighten the population into leaving. That which contradicts the Israeli narrative that the Arabs told them to leave for 2 weeks. We're going to wipe Israel out of the map, and you can come back. So the Israeli historians themselves are
that narrative, right?
With there's this new film, I haven't seen it yet. It's called Tantura, which is about a massacre committed in '48 by one of the elite brigades of the Haganah at the time. I know about this because it was a thesis by a student in Haifa, and he was failed and denied. He was persecuted, the poor chap, because he dug the story up, which was buried.
Right.
And he managed to, it was a big thing in academia in Israel at the time, and it was in the '90s, in the early '90s.
But that's I guess part of this shifting of the narratives as well, internally inside Israel as well, right? That they're reconciling with the inevitable truth of what has been done in their name in order for the state of Israel to exist. I mean, that's something that I think Guterres put it well. I mean, what Hamas did doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are upstream causes.
But it's still
not justifiable in any sense. No, 100%. Absolutely.
Palestinians should realize that if they're liberated by Hamas, later, they will be ruled with the same barbarity.
And there's no question, and I certainly didn't mean to allude that it's in any way justified. Absolutely not.
No, I know you don't, but I can tell you that if I express any criticism of Hamas now among Palestinians, they will rise against me and accuse me of
of course. And again, that's part of human nature. That's what we talked about before. Yeah.
And it's the same with Israelis now. You cannot. It's so polarized. And I think Yuval Harari is absolutely right. It cannot be resolved by the two. It's a downward spiral between them. There has to be an international initiative, which is not happening.
Yeah. So what? I mean, how can this be de-escalated? Or maybe I should ask you, how do you see this firstly unfolding from where we are now? How do you see this going forward, given what is happening in Gaza? And then perhaps we can delve into some more kind of nuanced discussion as to how this and who could help usher some hope into the region.
Yeah. Well, if I'm to be realistic, which I'm not, I would be very pessimistic, because I don't think that it's inevitable that there's going to be a war here.
Right. Okay.
And it's not going to be Hezbollah that will start it. It will be started by
as a preemptive move to silence the northern border, I guess.
I don't see how Israel can continue with the threat of Hezbollah on the border, and the settlers going back, and the villages being repopulated in northern Galilee, and the mobilization and the alert necessary to survive without normal life on this is not feasible.
And is that because of
with that threat?
Sorry, is that because of the Hezbollah's military?
With the psychological,
okay, right.
with the psychological threat, with the psychological factor, sorry, of we cannot guarantee your security. I mean, the whole existence of Israel is because it's to give security to
the Jewish people,
to the Jewish people because of anti-Semitism, and which is a real factor. I mean, and for them, of course, it's very real. So if you have a state which cannot guarantee your security, you would back up and emigrate.
And are you seeing that actually happening? Are you hearing? Yeah,
I don't see it happening, but I'm imagining that these are that in my realist, pessimistic mode, this is the situation, and this will spread to Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Iran. It's a very bad situation. But if I'm going to switch to my unrealistic, optimistic mode, I think that if there is a joint diplomatic initiative by the Arab states, especially the Gulf states, together with Egypt and Jordan, and with the EU and the United States, before it goes into electoral coma, then this has to be treated. This has to be dealt with from a broader regional perspective, against Iran, of course, which the Americans don't still deny. I mean, how can they still say Iran has nothing to do with it? You know,
I mean, but is that
absurd?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I mean, what is the justification? I mean, is it to reduce the risk?
It's pure internal politics in America. If you're a Democrat, then you know there is then the IRGC doesn't exist. It's not a threat, because in the discussions between the United States and Iran about the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, the agreement was that none of the regional issues would be raised, that the discussions
just
would focus on the nuclear deal. One diplomat also told me that in one of the meetings, Foreign Minister Zarif explained to John Kerry that he only has the mandate from the Supreme Leader to discuss the nuclear deal, and that if there is even a mention of the Iranian role in Syria or in Iraq or in Lebanon or in Palestine or anywhere else, he would have to walk out of the room.
Right.
And if you review all the statements from the United States about Syria, where you had Iranian militias committing massacres in Homs and besieging, starvation sieges and depopulating whole areas, there wasn't a single acknowledgement that there was an Iranian role in Syria during that time, and there was even restrictions on the opposition that they were training, that they should not attack Assad. They can only use the training and the arms to attack ISIS, and they should not attack Assad, because they were afraid that if they attack Assad with American training and American arms, they could hit an Iranian
unit
by mistake, and this would spoil the deal. So then when the Americans were focusing, it's like a donkey or a horse when you put blinkers on.
That's interesting, yeah.
So I mean, if you consider this from the perspective of the region, the United States is definitely not a reliable partner. To its allies, it's very reliable. To its enemies,
Right.
you can rely on it blundering if you're
And making
if
advantageous
you're an
mistakes
American ally.
for you. As
Yes, absolutely. They can be manipulated. They can, and it's a huge mystery. How this can
so
be.
then this nuclear Iran threat is the price of everything else that's allowed to play out in the region for regional dominance, etc.
At
Right.
the time,
Because the JCPOA is
by
no longer.
allowing,
Yeah.
but yeah, the JCP during the discussion of the JCPOA, the United States um, um, ignored all the IRGC activities in the region.
Okay.
I'll tell you, there was an incident when, there was in 2019, 2020, there was a huge revolt against Iranian militias in Iraq called the Tishreen movement, which was completely ignored by the United States. And President Biden met with the Iraqi Prime Minister one day after. There was a woman in Najaf or Basra, I can't remember, either Basra or Najaf, who was an activist against child recruitment by militias. She had an NGO against child soldiers, and she was threatened by the Iranian militias in Iraq, and she defied them. They gave her an ultimatum to leave the city, and she stayed. They killed her son as a punishment. They knew that killing her, she didn't care. They killed her son. 2 days later, President Biden met with the Iraqi Prime Minister Kazemi, and he spoke about climate change, about giving him surplus vaccines and help with the elections, and insisted that the elections should happen, which the Iraqi opposition was against. So the elections were an Iranian because their militias would win, and this election was boycotted by the Iraqi opposition, the Shiite opposition in Iraq. So that shows you how disconnected the Americans sound when they speak about the region. Exactly like,
as you said, with Blinken,
Foreign Secretary Blinken, even thinking of suggesting a mass displacement of 750,000 people to Turkey, 500,000 to Egypt, and any.
I mean, it's.
I'm not going to mention.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, exactly. I mean, it's beyond naive because I mean, is it just naivety? I mean, or is it just? I don't know. It's just.
And Blinken is a very worldly person. He was brought up in Paris. He went to one of the most elite lycées, and he's not. There is the American system. There's a system in the United States which is called security clearance, which ensures that the least qualified person reaches the highest position.
The one who's experienced the least, right? Who's got the cleanest record.
Yes, because the security clearance is based on probability of you betraying your country. So they assign a probability to every component of your biography. If you were born in Boise, Idaho, and studied there and never left the town, you are less likely to betray your country than if you studied in Paris and lived in Athens and traveled to Vietnam and been to Beirut, God forbid.
So Yeah, I assure you, I know that process well.
Yes,
and the headaches associated with that process, particularly with somebody of my
yes,
colorful background,
yeah,
dare I say. So yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Look, Nadim, I feel like I could speak with you for hours because the more you say, the more questions I get, and I just find it so wonderful that you are able to link so many different things. But conscious of our time and in the interest of that time, perhaps I guess a final question. Given what you said about your fears about the region, what are you sleeping? What are you losing sleep over tonight, tomorrow night? In the kind of more immediate, in the
I'll
immediate
give
kind
you.
of next couple of days, what are you worried about?
Well, when you're in a situation like this, you live day by day. And I'm concerned about being able to travel next Tuesday to meet my son in Athens for a few
Yeah,
days and come back. That I'm only saying this as a banal thing because it is impossible
yeah,
to plan ahead, and you really
yeah,
live by the
yeah,
day. So I wasn't joking when I said
yeah,
every day I look out of the balcony to see if there are any Israeli
yeah,
planes
yeah,
bombing
yeah,
the city. It can happen anytime, and I don't see anything happening to prevent it.
yeah. And that's scary. And again, coming from somebody of your
It is.
background, of your understanding of the region, and of your personal experiences of previous iterations of like conflicts in the region, that's a scary thing to hear. And yeah, stay safe and well. Well, I mean again an absurd thing to say, given that we're in 2023, about to
Yeah.
soon enter 2024, that we're still talking in these types of tones. But be that as it may, thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time. I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome. It
The
was
the
enjoyable.
breadth and the width of the discussion is one I've thoroughly enjoyed.
And I've since I've been listening to your other podcasts. They're amazing. I'm even contemplating investing in a membership. Because
That is wonderful to hear. You know what? I'm going to pick this out and put this at the front of
yeah,
the episode, so,
yeah, you
so that
should. Yeah,
others who only listen, to the half of the episode, get convinced.
yes.
Yeah, that's right,
Marketing.
exactly.
Yes.
But no, I sincerely mean it. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to meet you in person in the near future, somewhere along the way.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
sure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Voices of War. And since you got this far, please take a moment to like and review the show wherever you get your pods. Thank you, and until the next time.